and trying to address the issues that the students may face. Well, before going into the texts, I would like to say a few words about 19th century American literature in particular. Emily Dickinson was born in 1830, and if we look at the scenario, as we put it, Emerson's Nature was published in 1836, and in 1837, Emerson delivered a lecture at the Phi Beta Kappa Society, which was later published as The American Scholar. Why I am talking about it? Because Emily Dickinson was born into an America which was seeing two things simultaneously. First of all, there was a resurgence of puritanical ideas. Lots of people were converting to Puritanism. And secondly, there was a sustained philosophical and literary move to counter the influence of Puritanism in American life, and they were moving from Puritanism to what we may call, in that sense, secularism. Because secularism primarily means a complete separation between the church and the state in the first place, and secondly, complete separation between church and public life. And the most important cultural movement of that period was transcendentalism. And transcendentalism can be described as a late flowering of Romanticism, which took about 30 years to cross Atlantic to reach the American shore. I say that can roughly be described as a late flowering of Romanticism. It had many things in common with European Romanticism, and there were things which were typical of America and specific to America, which were not shared by their English counterparts. Now, the man who is probably the first name in transcendentalist movement was Ralph Waldo Emerson, who himself was a priest of a Unitarian church. So from the priest of an Unitarian church, he moved to become the philosopher and guide of American intellectuals of the 1830s, 40s, and to some extent 50s. What does he speak about that America? That this was an America which has finally got over its colonial hangover. We often don't remember that America was a British colony. And like all colonies, America suffered from what we may describe as colonial hangover for some time, even after it, when it got its political independence. So one of the major aspects of these newfound, I should say, national identity is the kind of literature that was coming out of America. And you know, this nationalistic discourse is difficult, but it is very real. That to get out of the colonial hangover, it was necessary for them to forge an American identity, which will sustain them through their fight against what was once British colonialism and what loomed over their mind as overwhelming influence. So this was the situation when Emily Dickinson was born in 1830 in Amherst, Massachusetts, to a very conservative puritanical family. Dickinson's father was a well-to-do man, a lawyer, a politician who was finally elected to the American Congress. And as you can imagine, that a girl born to a puritanical society in the fourth decade of the, at the beginning of the fourth decade of the 19th century, what was her situation? Her father believed that women should not read a lot, because in America in those days they believed that the brain is in direct inverse relation to the uterus. If you read a lot, your infertility will be affected. So Emily was, she said that my father bought me a lot of books, but he never encouraged me to read all those books. And she was sent to Holyoke Seminary. She stayed there for 1 year. I believe it was 1846-47. She was about 16, 17 years old. And the only photograph of Emily which is available and which we see everywhere on the cover page of our collection of her poetry and several other places, that was the only photograph which was taken during her days in the Holyoke Seminary. Now, Emily really didn't like to be there. So after a year, she came back to Amherst, to her home. And incidentally, this is the same house where she was born. She lived all her lives, that is about 55 years, slightly more than 55 years, and she died there. Now, something which is curious about Emily, which as a student, the first thing I was told that she never published her poems during her lifetime. If I remember correctly, some 7 or 8 poems were published during her lifetime, whereas she wrote close to 2,000 poems. So imagine a woman who was writing poetry regularly, who wrote something like 2,000 poems, never published. But this is not to say that she was not aware of what she was doing. She was very aware. She meticulously jotted down all her poems. She arranged them chronologically. She put them into separate packets. So she knew what she was doing. But why then didn't she publish during her lifetime? So for this, we have to go a little bit back into her biography. And I still believe judicious mixture of background, these days this is called the context, and biography of the author, they make a very good beginning for reading anything written by the author. So first thing that I would like to tell the students is that Emily suffered from some kind of eye ailment. Probably that was the one of the reasons, probably the primary reason, that's why she never wanted to go out of home. That she lived a very secluded life was not necessarily psychological. It was also physiological, and there is record to show that during 1846-47, she paid visits to one of the renowned ophthalmologists of America at that point of time, who practiced in Boston, and the experience was very painful. So she lived with this malady all her life. Probably she could not tolerate too much of sunlight. That's why she didn't go out too much. That's one of the physiological reasons why she lived most of her life as a recluse in her hometown, in her paternal house. And she never married. And there are so many interesting facts about her biographical detail, and it has evolved in such a way, at least I find it very difficult to reconcile all the details and analysis that are available to us today, because her early biographers, they used to talk about her as being slightly eccentric, recluse by choice. Of course, she was a recluse by choice, but recluse because of her psychological orientation and things like that. But subsequently, there has been a lot of research into whatever was left of her writings. As I was telling you, she was a prolific letter writer also. She wrote about 2,000 letters, and of those 2,000 letters, at least 1,000 letters are extant. So poems and letters, the biographical details that are available to the scholars, they have come to the conclusion that She was a recluse by choice. It was not only psychological, it was ideological, it was theological, it was feministic, if I may use that word, because that's not the right English word. A little bit of feminism in her, and physiological problems. So all these things together made her what she was during her 55 years of life. Now, that Emily had been through crisis throughout her life can be seen from the poems that she wrote over this period of time. The first was, if I may say so, some kind of a religious crisis, because when she was in Holyoke Seminary, all the students were encouraged to convert to Puritanism, to dedicate themselves to the work of God, as they put it. Emily was probably the only one dissenting student who did not conform to the urgings of the school authority, and it has been recorded that she is the only dissenting student who did not listen to the school authority and finally left the school. And in her household, everybody, including her father, enthusiastically converted to Puritanism, the new surge of Puritanism that was sweeping through at least the eastern border of the United States of America. So there was a religious crisis. She was born a Christian, born into a puritanical family, but refused to convert to this new wave of Puritanism consciously. This is not to suggest that she was an atheist. This is not to suggest that she was crusading against Christianity. It's not that easy, so to say, that it was not something like a binary. She is either this or that. She did either this or that. No, it's very complicated. So the first rebellion was rebellion against religion. Second rebellion was probably against the authority of her father, because her father was a typical white Anglo-Saxon puritanical male who believed that men did, men ordered, and women obeyed. So there is no second opinion about it. This is something which Emily found difficult to digest. And not that she was openly rebellious, but that she was rebellious enough is evident from many of her poems. So the second crisis was the crisis of, I should not say parental dominance. It was not the mother. It was the father who dominated her life, at least tried to dominate her life. When she was in her 30s, she has already written a lot of many poems, and she was not too sure about the quality of her writing. At the same time, she felt that what she was writing was good enough. And if you ask me how is this possible, I will tell you if this is possible. Because here is a woman who, an intelligent, sensitive woman who was continuously, constantly struggling with what we may call life with a capital L. She was trying to find her own space, own place, and that is how she was negotiating. I am writing poems. At the same time, I am not too sure how good these poems are. And here came a phase in her life when she was looking up to people who were considered to be superior in various fields of life. There are her correspondence with Reverend Charles Wordsworth. Probably they met twice, not more than that. And critics argue that Wordsworth was some kind of a mentor, because there are a couple of letters which are addressed to a master. The master has never been named, and it's written by Daisy. It's obvious that Daisy is Dickinson herself, and she's continuously looking up to the master, asking him almost on her knees how good she is, how acceptable she is. And since the identity of the master is not known, it is also guessed that it could have been some Samuel Bowles, who was also a family friend. And I have read a very early biography where it was suggested that Reverend Wordsworth was kind of a lover figure for Emily Dickinson, and it has gone almost 360-degree awry, in the sense that I have read another biography which claimed that Emily Dickinson was a lesbian and probably also a bisexual. I'm not going into it, but what I'm trying to tell you is that, so there were men, that is important, because she already rebelled against the male dominance of her father within the family. At the same time, she is looking up to other male members of the society, prominent members, from whom she was asking for advice, and where she was slightly skeptical about her abilities. And so some kind of male dominance was still there. But subsequently, she, if I may put it like this, got over it, because she came to understand her strength. She could create a world for herself, and she became very confident. These things are important things in the development of any creative artist. And why didn't Emily ever marry? I would like to quote from a letter which is quoted so often that many of you may be familiar with it. This is a letter which she wrote to Susan Gilbert. Susan Gilbert became her sister-in-law later in life, and the lesbian theorist suggested that it was Susan Gilbert who was Emily Dickinson's lesbian partner. But by the way, this is the letter. Why didn't she get married? How she found marriage to be suffocating, detrimental to her interest in poetry, and could have completely destroyed her career as a poet. How dull our lives must seem to the bride and the plighted maiden, whose days are fed with gold, and who gathers pearls every evening. But to the wife, Susie, sometimes the wife forgotten. Our lives perhaps seem dearer than all others in the world. You have seen flowers at morning, satisfied with the dew, and those same sweet flowers at noon with their heads bowed in anguish before the mighty sun. Think you these thirsty blossoms will now need not but dew, but they will cry for sunlight and pine for the burning moon, though it scorches them, scathes them. They got through this phase. They know that the man of noon is mightier than the morning, and their life is henceforth to him. So the male figure, maybe the father, her father, if she married, and to all the married women who had a husband, it's like the sun in the noon that completely saps at the vitality of the woman. Oh, Susie, it is dangerous, and it is all too dear, this simple, trusting spirits and the spirits mightier, which we cannot resist. It does so then, Miss Susie. The thought of it when it comes, that I tremble lest at sometimes I too am yielded up. So she is scared that she might agree to get married. And so her conviction that marriage was detrimental to her interest as a poet was probably the most important reason why she never got married. And if we remember a poem by Adriana Rich, I don't know whether it's in the syllabus. snapshots of a daughter-in-law. There, she was, should I say, she was a very devoted reader of Dickinson. That here was a woman who was cleaning, cooking, washing, making jam, ironing clothes, but her life has stood as a loaded gun. And you can look at the image, loaded gun. What does it mean? That it can go off any moment. And she was always almost ready at the trigger. So how did she live her life in Amherst, in her father's house? She actually kept house. Her mother was bedridden for considerable period of time, and so she looked after the mother, and was sometimes disturbed by the prospect of financial difficulty after her father died. So everything which is part of a very ordinary life. But she probably believed that since she has confined herself to home, since she never got married, she doesn't have a husband, she doesn't have children to look after, she doesn't have catered to other people's needs, though she did cater to other people's needs because she looked after her mother, but they were not multiplied at least. She could create a world of her own, which was very conducive to her creativity. And something that she probably believed that this everyday life, the very mundane, ordinary business of living actually makes one grounded to the reality. And poetry is born only out of one's negotiation with reality. So if you look at the imagery that she has used in her poems, you will find that it is a very intense negotiation between life, which is very ordinarily lived, mundane, physical, grounded to everyday experience, and the world which somehow passes by, a world which she tries to capture, a word which sometimes slips through her fingers, but a word about which she is absolutely sure. And before going to the poems, I will have to tell you something else also. That is about the very unusual grammar, if I may put it, with her use of arbitrary, at least what seems to be arbitrary capitals. Because as per the rules of English grammar, you are supposed to use capital letters only at the beginning of a sentence and when you are talking about proper names. But she didn't do it. She almost completely did away with traditional English punctuation. And her prosody, her rhetoric, both are so unusual that it was not recognized as such at that point of time, because that is exactly what happens. And people who realize that this is very unusual for a man like T.E. Higginson, to whom she sent her poems, and who advised her not to publish those poems because she believed these poems needed a lot of improvement. And so Higginson sometimes described her half-cracked, because the way she wrote, the kind of punctuation she chose or she didn't choose, the kind of words she used, the method, she didn't use too many metaphors, but images which can also be metaphors, unusual images and metaphors, and all these things made Higginson believe that Emily was half-cracked, and that was an image that lingered for almost half of the 20th century, that here is a woman who is slightly soft in the brain, which she was not. I would like again to read, because these are the things I don't remember, as I don't know anything about Latin grammar. And one very renowned critic, she believed that Emily Dickinson was not really doing anything very, very unusual, because whatever she did was to use Latin grammar in English poetry. So Dickinson's irregular and inverted syntax, I am putting, often confuses readers, but many of her unusual constructions and adaptations of Latin rules outlined in a grammar of the Latin language, for the use of schools and colleges, which she used as a student. So she was basically going back to a Latin grammar book and using those dictates of Latin grammar in her English poetry. So she says, we talk in careless and we toss, use the adverbs as nouns. Like I lingered with before. Before is an adverb, but here she is using before as a noun. Her idiosyncratic syntax then is based on traditional usage, not ignorance or whim, as many critics have suggested. So here is a woman, intelligent, sensitive, methodical, very well read. She was very well read. So though she didn't have very what we call institutional education, but she was very well read. She read in the classics, she read in contemporary literature, and all these are reflected in her poems. Now, coming to the two poems that you have in your syllabus. One is number 640, I Cannot Live With You, and I believe 199, which is I Am Wife. I have finished that. So let me first go to 199. The poem is called, probably by this time you know that she did not give names to her poems, and subsequently when the editors collected the poems in an anthology, they used the first line as the title of the poem. So it's called I Am Wife, I have finished that. The word wife is with the inverted comma. And when you put a word, a very common word, which is all apparently being used in absolutely ordinary context within single inverted or double inverted commas, because you mean that whatever is meant by this word in general is not the only meaning intended. The intended meaning is much more complex, and that is why your attention is drawn to that particular word. So this is the operative word here, wife. I am wife, I have finished that. That other state, I am the. I am a woman now. It's safer so. So as I was telling you, why didn't she get married? Because she believed that being a wife will take up a lot of her time, attention, and energy, which she will not be able to devote to her poems, and which was an absolutely almost a spiritual necessity for her to write poetry. So I'm a wife, and what I'm supposed to do? Cook, clean, wash for you, bear your child, cater to all your needs. I have finished that. That other stage. I'm Tsar. Why Tsar? Because she is sovereign now. Now she is no more the wife. She is the Tsar. She rules her own world. She is governed by rules which she have made for herself. So she is autonomous, independent. That is what she means by Tsar. I am a woman now. I am not wife, but I am a woman. Now you see, the way she stuck to her domesticity has a very complicated relation to the way people were talking about women's position in America, women's position in society in 19th century America. It was believed that domesticity was a kind of opium which was used to keep women tied to their domesticity so that they don't go out of home, so that they don't challenge male dominance. But here is a woman who believed that she was confined to her home and thereby challenging male dominance. How odd the girl's life looks behind these soft clips. I think that earth feels so to folks in heaven. Now, look at the punctuation. She didn't use any punctuation other than the dash. It can be the comma, it can be the semicolon, it can even be the full stop. And most of the lines are incomplete lines. In English, it is called enjambment. That line runs on to the next line. In one single line, the meaning, the significance is not complete. So this being comfort, then that other kind was pain. But why compare? I am wife. Stop there. So there is almost a kind of binary between a wife and a woman. A wife is a woman who does not have complete authority over herself, and a woman is a woman who has autonomy and independence. Thing that needs to be mentioned here is that she is not considering herself any less because she is a woman. She is challenging male dominance, but she doesn't want to be a man. She is a woman, she will remain a woman, and still she will have her independent identity. This is a short poem, much like her many other poems. The next poem, I Cannot Live With You, is a much longer poem. And this poem is intriguing. This is not to say that other poems are not. Most of our poems are very intriguing. And the way the argument in this poem is developed, it kind of resembles Shakespearean sonnets, because what happens in a Shakespearean sonnet, because the sonnet runs to 14 lines, it is much longer than that. And you have thesis, then an antithesis, and in the final couplet, the rhyming couplet, you have some kind of a synthesis. Here, you won't find that synthesis, because well, she was very well versed in metaphysical poetry also, and the metaphysical poetry, the influence of metaphysical poets can also be seen in this particular poem, where contradictory ideas are juxtaposed, unusual ideas are juxtaposed, and unlike a Carpe Diem poem, it does not reach a conclusion which actually says that, well, in spite of all these difficulties and all these contradiction, finally it is love that wins. In a way, it's a love poem, but it is very unusual as a love poem, where she finally declares that we don't unite, never, and that's kind of final. So in the first stanza, she says, I cannot live with you. It would be life, and life is over there behind the shell. So when a woman lives with a man, she is married to him. So I don't want to get married to you. I am not living with you. Life is rather circumscribed when a woman is confined to her domesticity. So the next two stanzas talk about domesticity and how does she evoke the idea of domesticity. She is talking about porcelain, a broken cup, which is either discarded by the housewife, or she also refers to a church official, a sexton, whose duty is to look after the church and take care of the church property. So it's a two-pronged attacking message. So she is attacking the church as an institution and attacking marriage also as an institution. And I repeat, she was not really an atheist. She was attacking church as an institution, but completely kind of appreciated the passion that went behind the church. So she cannot live with the man. It would be very, should I say, claustrophobic, because it will be only China, domesticity, cooking, cleaning, etc. But then what is the alternative? I could not die with you. For one must wait to shut the other's gaze down. You could not. And now here I am slightly suspicious of the heterosexual scheme of the poem, which some critics have foregrounded. To shut the other's gaze down, because it's a preparation for leaving this world. A dead man's eyes are dead persons, I should say. By man, I include a woman as well, Homo sapiens, basically. So the gaze is shut down, and this word gaze is in capital G. If you read her poems carefully, you will find that she puts those words into capitals which she wants to emphasize. These are operative words. These are the words which need to be explored in greater detail so that meaning is yielded. So, what is the other person? The other person is a weak person, because one has to die first. If she dies, the other person will not be able to close her eyes. She is the stronger person, so she will outlive the other person, and she will close the other's gaze down. So she is the stronger person in the relationship. Is this an indication of a homosexual engagement? I am not sure. And could I stand by and see you freeze without my right of frost? That's privilege. So I will watch over you as you are dying. And the two poems that have been selected for this course are not directly related to death, because any critical study of Emily Dickinson will start talking first about her engagement with death, then about anything else. But here she is waiting upon the death of the other person. Nor could I rise with you, because your face would put out Jesus's that new grace. So she is not too sure that there is a life beyond this life, that there is heaven, that there is a place called heaven where you meet your creator face to face. So when you die, I will remember your face, and the remembrance will be so overwhelming that I will not even look into the face of the Jesus. I won't be able to look at his face, because everything will be overshadowed by your face. So I cannot live with you, I cannot die with you, I cannot rise with you. So what do? Glow plain and foreign on my homesick eye, except that you than he shone closer by. This he is Jesus. So the fact is, you are brighter than Jesus, you shine brighter than Jesus, and on my homesick eye. Homesick, why? Because she was fond of her home, or eyes were sick, that is why she could not leave her home. I find these expressions rather metaphysical. They would judge us. How? For you, subheaven, no. Or sought to, I could not. So after doomsday, you may go to heaven. Because you saturated sight and I had no more eyes for sordid excellence as paradise. I am so saturated with you, I am so overwhelmed with your presence that I probably will not be judged to deserve heaven. And where you lost, I would be, though my name rang loudest on the heavenly fame. And where you said, and I condemn to be where you were not, that self were help to me. So we do not unite, neither in life, nor in death, nor in resurrection. So if you go to heaven, I do not go to heaven. If I am called to the path of heaven, you don't reach there. So the divide is rather wide. And she is talking about a love relationship, isn't it? So there she goes widely, she traverses a widely different path from Shakespearean sonnets, because you see most of these poems, even metaphysical poems, there are apparent contradictions, uh, division of ways, one pursuing, the other refusing, all kinds of things are there. But at the end, the conclusion is we unite somewhere. But this is a poem where she does not come to any such conclusion. So we must meet apart. How does one meet apart? This is an oxymoron, isn't it? And she has very successfully used oxymorons throughout her poetry. And these oxymorons are important because these oxymorons give you clue to the understanding of the poem. You there, I here. So we are into a relationship. Probably we love each other, but we don't meet on a common platform. Never. With just the door as a, that oceans are and prayer, and that white sustenance, despair. So we are there, but we don't meet. We meet apart rather. You are across the door, I am here and you are there. And though it's a door which is kept azure, it's like ocean. And prayer and that white sustenance, despair. So finally we don't meet, we don't unite. There is not a fulfillment of love. It all ends in despair. And that gives me some kind of idea that she was not talking about heterosexual love. She, if I trust one of these biographers who claimed that it was Susie, her brother's wife, who was the object of her affection, you can see the ocean between them two, and she may be referring to it as well. So they didn't share the same household. Her brother lived next door. They almost visited each other every day. So not in the same household, but in close proximity. They meet, but they are apart. There is just a door azure, but there is an ocean between us. And finally, there is despair. So what kind of a love poem is this which ends in despair? Not the kind of despair that you are refusing me, you are avoiding me, you are cruel, the kind of things you will find in 16th century poetry. No, nothing like that. There is no hint, not a single word about you being unwilling to enter into the relationship or unwilling to love. With this, I move over to the 20th century. Dickinson was born in 1830 and Plath was born in almost 100 years later in 1932. Well, this is part of women's writing syllabus, but here are two women who are as different as they can be, because Emily was kind of composed, who could control her rebellion. She was rebellious, but who could control her rebellion. And here is the other woman who was also rebellious, had various spiritual crises in her life, almost failed to negotiate it, and ended in a suicide. Plath was an American born and brought up in America, moved to England, married a fellow poet, Ted Hughes, lived the last years of her life in England, first in Devon with her husband and 2 children, and after her separation from Ted Hughes in 1962, in the summer of 1962, she moved to London with her 2 kids, and she committed suicide in next year, 1963. February 1963. So she was married to Hughes in 1956, separated from him in 1962, moved to London later in the year, and within 3-4 months committed suicide. Now, a very troubled life. She didn't know how to deal with it. She desperately tried to, but probably finally could not. There are 2 poems, Daddy and Lady Lazarus. The 2 poems kind of talk about the same experience in her life, and interestingly, she published 2 works in her lifetime. One was Colossus, an anthology of poetry. The other was a novel, which is called The Belzer. And her most widely read collection, Ariel, was published posthumously. And most of the poems in Ariel were written during these last 3-4 months of her life. Well, where is that letter to her mother? Well, in a letter to her mother, which was Aurelia Plath, which was written in October 1962, Plath writes, what the person out of Belsen, physical or psychological, wants is nobody saying the body still go to it, but the full knowledge that somebody else has been there and knows the worst, just what it is like. So that is how she was feeling, in those months in London, alone in a flat with 2 very young children, separated from her husband, going through all kinds of, starting from financial to psychological, all kinds of hardships. And again, in a letter, she tells her mother that there is a burst in her creativity. She is writing frantically, and which is evident from her papers, which were collected after her death and arranged and published in the anthology called The Ariel. Now, Plath was of German descent. Her father, Otto Plath, was born in Poland, moved to the United States, taught in a college. Her mother, Aurelia, was actually a student of her father. They married. And there are biographical details to suggest that Plath did not actually enjoy a very warm relationship with her mother. Her father died when she was only 8 years old, died young. And her relationship with her father is also troubled. Troubled not because trouble not going out of personal contact, because she was very young when the father died. But whatever she remembered of him, and of more importantly, the way she looked up to him, and she felt completely betrayed and devastated when the father died, because in her childish imagination, the father was was a very tall figure, invincible. How can he die? And it was almost a betrayal that he died and left her orphaned. So that was again a very troubled relationship with her father. That is in imagination, and in real life the trouble was there with her mother. She had trouble with in her relationship with her husband, and throughout these two poems you will find that there is a figure of man who is an oppressor. Whether that is the father, whether that is the husband, they are oppressors. And she revolts against them, rebels against them, tries to fight it out, and finally declares that after her death she will be resurrected just like a phoenix, and she will eat up all men. And you see, in Plath's poem also, you will find certain references, images which are rather violent. One thing I would like to remind you that Plath belonged to a school of poets who called themselves confessional poets. The idea was writing poetry is like catharsis. Whatever is cooked up in your mind, you give vent to it in your poems. So it's the image, the metaphor that was being used is this poetry is raw, and other kind of poetry they are cooked, by which is meant that cooking is you add things to it, you process it. So finished poetry of other kinds, these are like cooked food, and confessional poetry is like raw food, which is not. Because even Plath's paper will show you how she worked on the first draft. So she was also serving cooked food. And if we go 200 years back, the same thing is applicable to Wordsworth. Everybody worked on their poems. Everything was considered twice, thrice, made corrections, they made corrections, they added, they deleted. So finally, what they presented was what they considered to be a finished product. So there is no reason to believe that the very disturbing, violent images that Plath uses in her poetry is actually raw expression bursting out of our very troubled consciousness. It can as well be deliberate, because that was her idea, how to disturb people. Because one way of making your poetry get across to readers is to shake them violently, disturb them, so that they don't forget what they have already read. They keep on coming back to it and try to make sense of it. So I really don't know which poem was written earlier, so I'm not maintaining chronology. I start talking about Lady Lazarus. Anirban, what's the time limit? Hello?
You can continue for 15 minutes.
15 more minutes. Okay. So you are all familiar with the biblical figure Lazarus, who was dead for 3 days and brought back to life. So it's basically resurrected. The poetic persona in this poem is Lady Lazarus, so a woman who has been resurrected from death. If you remember the details of Plath's biography, that she attempted suicide, she herself says, once in every decade. So at the age of 10, she was washed away in the sea. Whether that was deliberate or not, there is no agreement of opinion. But at 20, she tried to commit suicide, and in 30, she was successful in committing suicide. So she is troubled. She knows that she has that tendency in her, which goads her to the thought of suicide and at least attempt at it. So the very first line refers to it. I have done it again. 1 year in every 10 I managed. As I was telling you, once in every decade she tried to commit suicide. A sort of walking miracle, my skin bright as a Nazi lampshade, my right foot a paperweight, my face a featureless fine Jew linen. And here he keeps on creating a binary between the Nazis and the Jews. Here she presents her father, Otto Plath, as a Nazi figure, but in real life, Otto Plath was not a Nazi. And the poetic persona also imagines the mother to be a Jew. So the problem is, here is a girl who is born to parents, one of whom is a Nazi, the other is a Jew. In 1962 BBC recording of Lady Lazarus reading, Plath said, the speaker is a woman who has the great and terrible gift of being reborn. Because sorry, when she attempted suicide, she wanted to die, but when she was saved, she kind of tried to get back to quote-unquote normal life. The only trouble is she has to die first. She is the phoenix, the libertarian spirit, what you will. She is also just a good, plain, very resourceful woman. So you can clearly see the dichotomy. And she was intensely aware of that dichotomy in her life. So the father is a Nazi figure. She died. He died. He left her orphan, and she's angry at it. So, and this refers to the way the Germans treated the Jews. Something very difficult to talk about also, because they made shoes with their skin, they made soaps from the lard extracted from the bodies of the Jews who were put into the furnace. So she continuously refers to it, that she is like a Jew who has been through excruciatingly painful experience to which she was subjected by the Nazis. Here the Nazi is the father figure. And I, a smiling woman, I am only 30, and like the cat, I have 9 times to do. The cat is the proverbially is supposed to have 9 lives. This is number 3. So she is contemplating suicide. One when she was 10, once when she was 20, now she is 30. What a trash to annihilate each decade. What a million filaments the peanut crunching crowd shoves in to save. Then unwrap me hand and foot, the big striptease, gentlemen and ladies. And she's talking about her experience of attempted suicide at 20. She consumed sleeping pills. She was brought back to life by the doctors, and people didn't have any sympathy for her. She was something like an exhibit. People came to watch her, just as people go to watch an opera, a football match, for example. As she says that they are peanut crunching crowd, absolutely insensitive. And the way I am kind of exhibited before them, it feels like a striptease. Striptease is a kind of dance where the dancer takes off clothes one by one. These are my hands, my knees. I may be skin and bone. Nevertheless, I am the same identical woman. The first time it happened, I was 10. It was an accident. That is what she says. The second time, I meant to last it out and not come back at all. She consumed sleeping pills. And the first time, it probably was an accident. And now she says that second time, it was a well-considered decision. But what happened that doctors brought me back to life. She feels cheated. She feels the doctors didn't honor her intention. It was a kind of betrayal. Dying is an art. Like everything else, I do it exceptionally well. So, very disturbing statement. Committing suicide, contemplating the way you can commit suicide, you can be washed away in the ocean, you can actually consume sleeping pills, and finally when she died, she put her head into the stove, into the oven, I believe. So there are various ways of committing suicide, and she keeps on contemplating which will be more effective. So dying is like an is an art, like everything else, like writing poetry or singing. I do it exceptionally well. You may be a good singer, you may be a good poet, whatever you are, but I do die exceptionally, as if it is possible to die once, twice, thrice, come back like Lady Lazarus and talk about your experience. I do it so it feels like hell. I do it so it feels real. I guess you could say I have a call. So I have some kind of expertise, some kind of inspiration to do this. It's easy enough to do it in a cell. If you have closed your windows and doors, you are in a cell, completely segregated from the outside world. It's easy enough to do it and stay put. It's the theatrical comeback in broad day to the same place, the same face, the same route, amused shout. So she actually consumed sleeping pill and hid beneath the staircase. But her brother and mother dragged her out, rushed her to a hospital, and she was saved. So it was. She thought it would be a very private act. She will consume sleeping pill and she will die. But it became something very public. She was taken to the hospital, and the rest followed. So she calls it a theatrical, as if it's a performance. Is it a rehearsal? What she did at the age of 20 was a rehearsal. A miracle that knocks me out. And that she was saved, it was considered to be a miracle. For the eyeing of my scars, there is a church. For the hearing of my heart, it really goes. So people, peanut crunching people who have come to use this spectacle, you have to pay some money, some fees for watching this. Or a piece of my hair on my clothes, sorry, for a word or a touch or a bit of blood or a piece of my hair on my clothes. So her doctor, so her enemy. So this is the German word for Mr. So Mr. Doctor, my enemy, you have done this to me. You have brought me back, you have betrayed me, you have made me an object of interest. People are coming to watch me as if I'm an exhibit, and they have to pay the price for it. I am your opus, I am your valuable, the pure gold baby that melts to a shriek. I turn and burn. Do not think I underestimate your great concern. I know you are concerned about me, but ash, ash, you poke and stir, flesh, bone, there is nothing there. Probably she is referring to Belsen, the concentration camp, where the Jews were burned to death. And when the fire was reduced to ash, they poked and stirred the ash to find out the bone here, the fat there, the skin here, kind of thing. A cake of soap, that is what was made of the remains of their body. A wedding ring, a gold filling. Her God, her Lucifer, beware, beware. So, if you consider yourself to be God, if you are in the opposite camp, you are the Lucifer, all beware. Out of the ash I rise with my red hair, and I eat men like air. So, this doctor, the father, the husband, all these men are, if you consider yourselves to be God, let you. If you are Lucifer, let you, I don't care. But out of this ash, like the phoenix, I will rise. And when I do, I will eat up all men. I'm not too sure whether it's a very powerful feminist statement, but something that disturbs. And probably in those last 4 months of her life, she was so disturbed. She was um, she was um, she was writing in a frenzy that this kind of expression came to her naturally. I go to Daddy. I start with Plath's own word. Here is a poem spoken by a girl with an electrocomplex. Her father died while she thought he was bored. Her case is complicated by the fact that her father was also a Nazi and her mother very possibly Jewish. In the daughter, the two strains marry and paralyze each other. She has to act out the awful little allegory once over before she is free of it. And she has also spoken about her mood swings. Sometimes she is jubilant, sometimes she is very depressed. Probably the psychiatrists will call it a bipolar disorder. Probably she actually suffered from bipolar disorder. And as I was telling you that when her father died, she was too young. So she probably does not remember much of her interaction with her father, because if people live to be old enough to understand the father as another individual, the interaction takes a different color. But here it was not possible.
Hello, ma'am. I think your data is running out. You can turn off the camera and unmute the microphone. Sorry, some kind of technical glitch here. We're waiting for ma'am to re-enter. Maybe some kind of technical glitch or data is running out. In the meantime, I just read out a message received from the administrator of the college, Mr. Harsimran Singh, administrator and SDO. We have received a message, just received the message, and I am reading out his message. I am really glad to know that web workshop is being organized by Department of English and IQAC Santipur College on the women writings and popular literature. We are fortunate that experienced faculty have agreed to participate in the workshop and share their insights. Sessions by experts on the popular writings would help the participants understand and appreciate the works of the authors in a much better way. Discussions on writings from women authors would help not only in understanding different issues from women's point of view, but also enrich the worldview of the participants. I am sure that the participants would benefit from the workshop, which would help them cover their curriculum as well as further arouse their interest in English literature. Subdivisional Magistrate, Ranaghat, and Administrator, Santipur College. Okay. We can just wait for Professor Sharmila Majumdar, but this is really very insightful, interesting and detailed, critical, thorough analysis. And this is in parity with the motto of the workshop as designed and thought of. Very detailed, critical reading of Emily Dickinson and Sylvia Plath's poems. And I must say, this is a very positive, assertive, and encouraging beginning. So we have a considerable number of questions, queries received from faculties and students. So we are just waiting for ma'am to re-enter the web platform. Maybe some technical glitch. Just wait for a moment, please. Ma'am is rejoining within a moment. So please stay on with us. Please cooperate. In the meantime, you can write down your questions and queries and comments in the chat box which we can put forward to Professor Majumdar. We'll discuss the question concerned. Although we have already received a considerable number of questions and queries.
Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. Please continue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I was talking about Daddy, and again, this is a poem where the father is presented as a Nazi, which he was not. I told you in your earlier, and she is angry that he died and left her. So she is talking about an experience where the Jews were being taken to the concentration camp, maybe at Belsen, and as if she is a part of the troop, and she is talking to her father. Uh, you do not do any more, black shoe in which I have lived like a foot for 30 years, poor and white, barely daring to breathe or chew. So her father, she considers that he is a huge figure. She can only touch the boot, the shoe of her father, and also the Nazis made shoes from the skin of the Jews. So all my 30 years I have lived in that huge shoe, so scared that I can't even breathe or sneeze. Daddy, I have had to kill you. You died before I had time. Marble heavy, a bag full of gold, ghastly statue with one grave toe, big as a fresco's seal. So why did she have to kill the father? Because the father is domineering, authoritarian, represents the male. That is why she needed to kill him. But he didn't give him the give her the chance to do that, because he died even before that. So I don't think there is much time left. So she is continuously referring to her father in various terms. For example, she says, in the German tongue, in the Polish town, scraped flat by the roller of wars, wars, wars. But the name of the town is common. My Polak friend. Polak is Polish. In United States, Polak is used pejoratively for the Polish, and her father was born in a Polish town called Bravo, which saw many wars and was almost completely flattened down by these wars. Says there are a dozen or two, so I never could tell where you put your foot, your root. I never could talk to you. The tongue stuck in my jaw. That is complete breakdown of communication. One primary reason being that the father was dead. The secondary reason being she could not think of her father as being an ordinary human being who died prematurely. So the father was always something like God, um, authoritarian figure. God is authoritarian, and somebody who completely betrayed her. It stuck in a barbed wire snare. Ish, 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 which in German probably means I, me, and myself. I could hardly speak. I thought every German was you, and the language obscene. So you see how she is trying to externalize her obsession with the idea that all German are Nazis, all Nazis are cruel, and all male are Nazis. So that is how the equation runs. And the train moves to an engine, shuffling me off like a Jew to Dachau, Auschwitz, Belsen. I began to talk like a Jew. I think I may well be a Jew because that is the clear barrier between it's Nazis on one side and Jews on the other. The oppressor is the Nazi, be it the father, be it the husband, be it anybody else, and the oppressed are Jews. So she imagines herself to be a Jew. The snows of the Tyrol, the clear beer of Vienna, so the train is passing through Austria, are not very pure or true. With my gypsy ancestors and my weird luck and my tarot pack I may be a bit of a Jew. Actually, Plath was a believer in the predictions of tarot cards. I have always been scared of you. With your Luftwaffe, that is the German Air Force, your gobbledygook, which is excessive use of technical terms, and your neat moustache, again a representation of Nazi Aryan male, because the Nazis believed in some kind of eugenics, where they believed that all the impure bloods of non-Germans can be cleared out of the German race and they will create a pure German race. And your Aryan eye, bright blue, Panjurman, oh you, that the Panjurman are the German tank top. So look at the war imagery that she uses. It's a war, full-blown war between the Nazis and the Jews and the rest of the world, between men and women, between the father and the daughter. And men, father, men, Nazis, Jews, not necessarily, Nazis and God, not necessarily in that order, they are all oppressors. Not God, but a swastika, so black no sky could speak through. Every woman adores a fascist, the boot in the face, the brute heart of a brute like you. Let me tell you very frankly, I don't understand these lines. Why does she believe that every woman loves a fascist? If the verb was not love, I would like to have substituted it with fear, because fascist is not necessarily a particular political ideology here, or particularly refers to the Nazis only. You stand at the blackboard, Daddy, because he was a teacher. In the picture I have of you, a cleft in your chin instead of your foot. How the father is being equated with the Lucifer, because the Lucifer is supposed to have a cleft foot. Here the father doesn't have a cleft foot, he has a cleft chin. Any less the black man who beat my pretty red heart in two. I was 10 when they buried it. At 20, I tried to die and get back to you. So how do I take revenge on you? By dying. I thought even the bones would do, but they pulled me out of the sack because I consumed sleeping pills and I was resurrected. And they stuck me together with glue, and then I knew what to do. So though I attempted suicide, I couldn't die, and I thought the best way to take revenge on you is to die. I made a model of you, a man in black with a May Camp look. May Camp is Hitler's autobiography. So I imagined you to exactly look like a typical Nazi. And maybe here is a reference to Ted Hughes as well, because when they separated, Hughes was having an affair, and Plath was understandably very upset, and she probably considered Hughes's presence in her life to be overbearing. So I love of the rack and the screw, and I said, I do. So Daddy, I'm finally through. The black telephone's off at the root. The voices just can't go through. So the telephone was reminiscent of her father. Probably it belonged to her father. So the telephone is off at the root, which means all connections are severed. So at the beginning of the poem, she has talked about lack of communication with her father. At the end of the poem, she is reiterating her her dismay at having absolutely no communication with father. Would it have improved the relationship if we had communication? Would she have considered father less of an enemy if there were communication? Probably there is some such idea here. If I have killed one man, I have killed two. The vampire who said he was you and drank my blood for a year, 7 years, clear reference to Ted Hughes, because they were married for just 7 years. If you want to know, Daddy, you can lie back now. So when I kill you, I don't only kill you, I also kill another man, two men at least, and these two men are representative of man, so to say, the masculine in my life. There is a stake in your fat black heart, and the villagers never liked you. They were dancing and stamping on you. They are always knew it was you. Daddy, daddy, you bastard. I'm through. So she imagines that villagers knew that her father was a Nazi man. And so when the father died, they were happy. They were dancing and stamping on the dead body. They always knew it was you. You bastard. I'm through. Why are you a bastard? Because you betrayed mankind, probably. You betrayed my trust, probably. And that is why I kind of hate you. And it's a complicated relationship. Not only hate. She has made it clear that it's about a girl who had Electra complex. So there is love and there is hate. So once I can commit suicide and quickly in my another decade has passed. So when I do it, I'm true. So my negotiation with you, my hatred, my thought of revenge, everything ends with that. Thank you. I believe I have crossed my time. Hello?
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. And this is very insightful, thorough, intimate, detailed, critical reading of the poems, which would definitely be of great help for the students. And this is very much in parity with the motto of the workshop as designed and thought of. A very, very assertive, positive, and encouraging beginning, I must say. And we have received a considerable number of questions, queries, which have been there in the comment box. I'm just taking up a few of them and pitching in here. One is, why does Dickinson use such piercing dashes in the poem "I'm Wife," and has it any deeper significance?
I didn't get it again, please.
Why there has been hyphenated phrase? That is her question. Use of hyphenation.
Use of hyphenation in Emily Dickinson.
Yeah.
Yes, as I was telling you that she was trying to create an alternative poetics for women, because she believed that the traditional rhetoric, traditional prosody, traditional punctuation, they are male dominated, and they are the women, when they talk about their own experience, they need separate poetics, and that which replaced standard English punctuation is her way of creating that alternative poetics.
Okay. Another question is about she is asking about the elaboration of the phrase soft eclipse.
Which poem?
Soft eclipse. The phrase soft eclipse.
Which poem?
And I think this is in Emily Dickinson's.
Emily Dickinson.
Another is about connection between Dickinson's imagery and the theme of death.
Imagery and death.
Yeah.
It's a day-long deliberation, actually. Death. How do I begin? Because death is a theme with which she has dealt so intensely, so often, in so many number of poems that it's very difficult to answer in a very short span of time in 2-3 sentences. But imagery, her imagery is unique. Again, probably an attempt at creating feminist poetics. And she has used mundane, everyday, sometimes unusual images for death.
Okay. So, audience, you can unmute your microphone and can ask. Now, the platform is open for questions, comments, and queries and reflections from students, scholars, and faculties as well. Please unmute your microphone and put forward your questions, comments, and queries.
Hello? Hello?
Yes, please.
Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am, for your valuable insights on Sylvia Plath and Emily Dickinson. My question to you is, do you think that the outspokenness of Sylvia Plath is misunderstood, which is expressed through her writing?
Misunderstood by whom?
By the readers, ma'am, because during her time she was not considered a lot, but then posthumously she became famous, and we see that it's not well. So do you think that her writings were misunderstood?
Actually, the 2 poems that we are doing here, these were published posthumously after her death. So I don't think too many people had access to all these poems which use this violent imagery with these outbursts. So in her lifetime it was not, because not too many people had access to it. But after her death, of course, there were critics who were not too comfortable with the kind of imagery and very violent imagery and references to concentration camp that she used in her poems. And a counter argument is offered by also considerable number of critics who believe that it was her way of putting forward the her agony, her despair, the tremendous upheaval that she underwent. So all these things can be expressed only in this kind of language. That is to say, the idiom has to match the emotion. So two schools are there, and they have their own argument.
Thank you, ma'am.
Hello?
Hello. Am I audible?
Yes.
Hello.
This is Dipannita Nasper here. Actually, I wanted to ask you, ma'am, that can we consider Sylvia Plath's attempts to commit suicide and her final, suicide as an act of resistance against patriarchal world in some ways? Can it
Absolutely.
be? Yeah,
Absolutely. That
exactly.
was her agony. She wanted people to understand that, not everybody, the people who
Exactly.
mattered, but they didn't. Absolutely.
It
Uh,
was a
it
mode
was
of resistance. Yes.
yes.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Any other question? One is there, ma'am, you told that Emily Dickinson revolted against the institutes of marriage and religion, but in the two poems discussed, she imagined herself as a wife and a lover. So can we say that she was employing the popular tropes of a time like wifehood and religion to expose their hollowness? Was she in any way not distancing herself from those aspects, but deliberately engaging herself with those tropes to expose their hollowness?
Yes, in a way, because when she puts the wife within inverted commas, she makes it clear that she is contesting the idea, isn't it?
Yeah, yes, yes.
It's the unacceptability of the position of a woman as a wife that she is talking about. And the second poem, I Cannot Live With You, that makes it very clear that it's not a conventional heterosexual love relationship that finally finds fulfillment in marriage. We cannot live together, we cannot die together, we cannot be resurrected together. We will always have to be separate and we don't unite. That's the whole um, idea of the poem. That's the statement in the poem, that we are always apart.
Someone asked if Dickinson can be regarded a pessimistic poet.
Which one?
Dickinson can be regarded a pessimistic poet.
No,
I
she
believe
was
so.
not. She was not. She, though she rejected certain conventional ideas, that does not necessarily mean she was pessimistic. She was negotiating the world in her own terms. She is as optimistic as any of us, negotiating the
Exactly.
world on her own terms. Only thing, we can't do it on our own terms, we do it on everybody else's terms. That's it.
Yes. Any other question or comments?
Hello, ma'am. Just want to ask one this question, ma'am. Do you think that Daddy is a form of protest where Sylvia Plath is protesting against the early death of a father? As you said, it's like an Electra complex. Because her father died, as you said, her father died at very early age. That's why I'm asking
Yes,
this
it's
question.
not really a protest. It was some kind of frustration, because as she has made it clear that she thought him to be God, and that God can die young was something unacceptable to her, and she thought it deliberate. She didn't realize that her father was an ordinary human being and completely subservient to death. He had no choice, but she always believed that it was an act, deliberate act. It was a deliberate act.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Hello.
Yes,
Hello.
please.
Uh,
Please.
I have a question to ma'am. Thank you, ma'am, for your lecture. I just wanted to ask you, as you said that Sylvia Plath regarded herself. Hello.
I can't hear clearly. Slightly louder.
Ma'am, as you said that Sylvia Plath regarded herself as a failure, so do you think she regarded herself a failure as a poet or as a person? I mean, how much can I relate her as a
Regarded herself as.
as a poet or as a person? I mean, as a person.
Mm, will you please repeat?
Ma'am, my question is, Sylvia Plath regarded herself as a failure. I mean, failure as a poet or as a person. I mean, how much her real life is related to her work.
Very much. And I don't think she considered herself a failure as a poet.
Okay.
Uh, well, failure as a person, maybe because she was finding it very difficult to negotiate um, with her problems. It's not only material problems, her psychological problems. So, in that sense, whether she considered herself a failure or not, I'm not too sure, but there is definitely lines of desperation. But as poet, there is no reason to believe that she considered herself to be a failure, because if you go back to the letters that she wrote to Olivia Plath during those last 4 months of her life,
Yes,
she was
ma'am.
quite confident that she
Mhm.
was producing valuable.
Yeah, the most important poems of her life.
Yes, the most important things.
Mhm. Thank you, ma'am.
So a considerable number of questions taken up, discussed, analyzed, and we must say this is very, very insightful and detailed, critical reading of the poems. So now the microphone is over to the convener of the workshop, Moumita Bishwash.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the organizing committee of IQAC and Department of English, Santipur College, we thank our chief guest, Professor Shankar Kumar Ghosh, Honorable Vice Chancellor of Kolani University. Undoubtedly, students and faculty members are encouraged beyond words by his inaugural speech. It is really a privilege and proud moment for us to listen to him. His analysis of this critical time of pandemic in terms of crisis in larger society and how teacher-student interaction has transformed has illuminated thoughts in our minds. We are certain that his informative lecture has clarified certain doubts regarding how to strengthen and make aware the larger community to fight the cause. Also, we thank our respected principal, Dr. Chandrima Bhattacharya, for sharing excellent words of encouragement. We are immensely grateful to our plenary speaker, Professor Sharmila Majumdar, for such an informative, in-depth, scholarly, yet lucid discussion on Emily Dickinson and Sylvia Plath's life and work. Thank you, Dr. Majumdar, for providing engaging academic discourse and analytical perspective towards text prescribed in the curriculum. Such an excellent session will sharpen inquisitive minds of young students and develop their critical thinking, undoubtedly. We would like to thank our participants for making today's session an engaging debate. I hope you will be benefited from this workshop in terms of developing curriculum-based knowledge as well as critical thinking. I hope we are grateful to the participating scholars and faculty members who have spent their invaluable times to enrich this discussion. Thanks to all the audience and participants. Over to you, Dr. Bhattacharya.
Thank you. So we will be moving to the next session tomorrow, which will be delivered. The special lecture will be delivered by Professor Sagar Tarango Mondal. And thank you all. Thank you everybody. Thank you all the students, faculties, scholars, and thank you, of course. We are thankful and grateful to Professor Sharmila Majumdar, faculty at the Department of English. Thank you all.